to the Thought Snob Podcast. I'm Paula Swope. Let's get snobby. This episode is dedicated to bringing awareness to sexual violence against women and how victims of rape can move on and heal after sexual assault. And we're about to have a very revealing, candid conversation that might trigger some of you. So I want you to be aware of what you're walking into right now. Now, I'm here with Alison Jennings. And if you look at her social media profiles, you'll see she describes herself as a singer-songwriter, visionary entrepreneur, a goddess of ideas. I love that. A connoisseur of sarcasm, and a car lover. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you'll find out that she's also a victim of brutal rapes that began when she was a 15-year-old virgin. It's even hard for me to vocalize that. And the things that transpired in Alison's life after that involved a gang rape by a group of well-known athletes. And the police department destroyed evidence to cover it up and ensure that she didn't have a case. The traumatic events Alison suffered led her to become a spokesperson for RAINN, which is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. She also works with an organization called We Lead Athletes. Her story has been featured on some of the world's largest and most prestigious media networks, including Dateline, CNN, Fox News, The New York Times, and many more. And today, she will talk about how hypnotherapy saved her life and helped her heal. So, Alison, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my God, I'm so happy to have you here. And I just want our listeners to know how we connected.
Yeah.
This is like the good part of social media. It's like I have met some of the most wonderful people on social media, and that's how I met you.
Yes, it is. So I was on TikTok, and I don't think I've ever previously or subsequently actually commented on anybody's anything. But for whatever, I'm very aware of energies, and I just always was drawn to your videos and your energy. So it was the day that you were doing a little snippet of the podcast with Phyllis Levitt, and you happened to mention a RAINN statistic. And I said, okay, I've got to say something about this because I don't typically hear people talk about RAINN. So it really drew me in. And so then I just commented, and then that's that.
Well, it's really kind of odd because I had never heard of RAINN. And when I was preparing for Phyllis's interview, I was just, doing a Google search, and RAINN came up, and I used their data for her interview. I don't really believe in coincidences. And one of the questions that I asked Phyllis, those questions came out of a conversation that I had with someone a few months ago. And this person is in their 30s, and they told me that they had been sexually assaulted like 5 years ago. And I was shocked to hear that because I knew nothing of it. And then this person said, it happened to me again a year later. Mm-hmm. Okay, that has been an ongoing theme that I have heard because I have a lot of friends that are victims of rape.
Yep.
Always happened to them more than once. And when I asked Phyllis about that, because she's for our people who are listening to us right now that haven't watched the episode that I did with Phyllis Levitt, she's a psychotherapist. And she did her dissertation, I think it was her dissertation, on that topic. And I had no idea that she had done her dissertation on that research study. Why does this happen to people more than once?
Yeah.
And that's a comment that resonated because that's the case with you.
Yeah.
Let's just rip off the Band-Aid here, and let's go back to 15-year-old Allison. What happened?
So I'll give you a little background on myself too, just because it kind of leads up to this. So my dad was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam,
Hmm.
and then he flew planes for Air America after he got out of the Marine Corps, but then became a case officer in the CIA. And so I didn't know that till I was 28.
That's so cool.
So I don't know how much of our moving around was PTSD or how much moving around was CIA or
CIA.
whatever business he was doing. But by the time I was two, I had already lived in 4 states, and I just want to set that up. So by the time I was 18 and graduated high school, I had lived in 8 states. So it wasn't weird that we moved around. But this particular move, when I was 14, we moved from Washington State to Texas. In a middle school, I was at a very small private school, 30 kids in the entire class, into public Texas high school, which was 1,200 kids. Nobody at the time, this was 91 that we moved there. I was not welcomed. If you weren't born and raised Texas, it was like nobody wanted to be your friend. So I felt very, very alone. Well, my dad started working 16-ish hours a day, so he really wasn't around. And my mom had my little brother who was in kindergarten, I believe. So I started hanging around the wrong crowd because they are the ones that accept you. If you party, they'll accept you. Well, I started hanging around this guy who was 19, and we, like back in the day, I don't know if this was anywhere else in the country, but the cool thing to do was just drive up and down the road, like the main street in the little small town, and you hung out at the car wash. And so that's what we did. So he and I went out one night, and he had asked me to give him oral sex, and I said no because I hadn't done anything. I didn't want to do anything. And personally, I think it was retaliation, but it was about 2 weeks later, and he called and asked if we wanted to go ride around. And I had a friend over that night, and she had just moved from Georgia. So she was looking for friends, and here I was looking for friends. And so we snuck out that night, and I just thought in my 15-year-old mind that we were going to go ride around for an hour or two and come back and sneak back through the window. Well, we ended up going to the ag barn, so the agriculture barn, where he was a part of that before, and he had a bottle of whiskey, and he asked us if we wanted one. She said no. I had never had liquor before in my life, and I wanted to be cool, so I said, "Okay, I'll take, I'll taste it." And when I went to go sip it, he held the bottle against my face, like held me, so I drank a lot. Having never drank like that before, I don't know. Things were kind of, I think it hit my system very quickly, and I don't really know. So a lot she had to relay to me. But he ended up meeting up with two of his buddies. They went and dropped her off in a field and left her there so that they could come back and meet me. And the next thing I know, I'm throwing up on his floorboard, and somebody behind me is having sex with me, and I have no idea who it is. I know that there was him and then two of his buddies, and I don't know the sequence of events because I mean I was sick. He eventually dropped us off, and when I say he dropped us off, I mean he didn't even stop. Like he opened the door, um threw us out. We obviously had picked her up at some point. She was traumatized too and never really said anything. Well, my mom was there waiting in my room, um, because a friend had called and she came to get me, and we weren't there. Well, I didn't say anything about what happened because I was so ashamed of myself and blamed myself for sneaking out. And so it was 3 weeks later that a friend of mine actually told my parents what happened. My dad ended up going to the chief of police and told him what happened. And I thought this was just a cliche, but he said verbatim, well, boys will be boys. And they were 19, 20, and 21. So at bare minimum, it should have been statutory. But so nothing nothing ever came of that one. And I mean, that's it in a nutshell,
Sure.
of what happened. But
I
yeah,
wonder why they decided, I wonder why they picked you.
I still, like I said, I really think it was retaliation. I think that it was kind of I think there's a power trip of people who, when I told him no, he took that as a challenge.
You're
Yeah.
probably
I mean,
right.
part of it. I'm sure there's other elements to it, but I
Sure.
think that became a challenge on top of just me never having had sex before. It was kind of this, again, another power trip,
Mm-hmm.
to say,
Right.
whatever he wants to say
It's
about
like a
that. Yeah.
trophy, like a
Yeah,
trophy.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. My stepdaughter started her freshman year in high school. And a lot of things have changed since I was in high school, but some things haven't.
Yeah.
And it's the gender roles when it comes to sex.
Hmm.
And I told her, because we were talking about something, and I said, no matter what anybody tells you, a guy can sleep with 50 women and he's praised for it.
Yep.
But let a chick do it, and she is condemned and labeled and slut shamed and all sorts of stuff. And
Yeah.
so when this happens to someone, especially at the age of 15,
Yeah.
it's not like anybody has the emotional intelligence to deal with that. After that happened, and your parents found out, and the police wouldn't do anything, you went to a
Mhm.
boarding school.
Yeah. So, and let me just say to your point as well, is I went to school that next week, and I had people coming up to me and calling me slut. And I had a girl who said that she was going to kick my ass because I slept with her boyfriend. I'm like,
Oh,
slept with your boy? I mean,
right.
it was awful. Oh God, it was just horrible. So I actually ended up going back to Washington and living with my friend and her mom for a semester. And then my parents moved again and they moved to Iowa. And I decided to go with them because I miss them and whatever. But it's like wherever you go, there you are. And so there I was again, and yeah, in different school, and started drinking and smoking and being promiscuous, which is a very common thing to do after you have been assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to the point where on the way to school, there was this cliff. And every time I would drive by it, and there was a period of probably a month where I just thought, what if I just go straight? What if I don't follow the road? What if I just go straight off this cliff? And my dad could feel it. And so one day he asked me, he said, "Are you suicidal?" And I said, "Yes." And that's when they said, "Okay, we have to do something." Because I was already in therapy, but I was now a 16-year-old girl. And it's like, I don't want to be in therapy. I wanted to be social and do my own thing. But I was suicidal. My parents did some research and found this boarding school in Montana. It was an all-girls therapeutic boarding school, and therapeutic I use in quotations
Mm-hmm.
because it was probably just as traumatic, if not more. I didn't know I was going. And so my parents told me that we were going to go look at houses in Montana, that we were going to move again, and that was normal. So I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to Montana and drive an hour and a half up from Missoula into the mountains. And we get there and I'm like, this is so weird. What kind of a real estate office is this? Because that's what they told me it was. And it was actually a converted dude ranch that they turned into this school. So got there, got into the office, and she said, Mr. and Mrs. Jennings, the girls are out skiing, but they'll be back soon. And I'm like, the girls are skiing? What is this? And my dad goes, have you figured out what this is yet? And I said, no. And he goes, this is an all-girls boarding school. And I just lost it. So I was there for about 19 months altogether. We were not allowed to have any outside influence. So we didn't have radio or TV or newspapers, or we had to get the friends that we corresponded with approved of because they were bad influences. We talked to our parents every other week for an hour, and it was while somebody was in the room with you talking to them.
God, it almost
So
sounds like a
basically,
cult.
oh God, it was. And you know, it's really so funny in retrospect. So we weren't allowed to wear whatever we wanted to wear. And so we had to basically order things out of LL Bean. And so I always say it's the LL Bean cult because
Oh God.
if you look at pictures of us, we all have these, you know, LL Bean outfits on from the mid 90s on our chest. Horrendous. And whoever thought that LL Bean could be triggering, but it is.
Right,
Uh,
right.
their philosophy was that we'll love you until you love yourself, except for that it was so psychologically damaging because we were treated like bad kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe in bad kids. I believe in hurt kids, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what we were. But um, we had to conform to what they were saying. And I had we were all assigned a therapist, and my therapist told me if I didn't start telling the truth, that they were going to send me to a lockdown facility in Utah, which I believe is actually probably the one that Paris Hilton went to.
Oh.
But so I just had to start saying what they wanted to say. And they all labeled us as sex addicts, alcoholics, narc addicts. So I had to go to AA meetings, and I knew I wasn't an alcoholic, and I had to pretend that I was. And just the psychological ramifications of being that way for close to 2 years was awful. And then there was no segue between that and college. So I went from complete isolation to where we couldn't even shave our legs because all the razors were taken away because somebody tried to, you know, split
Mm-hmm.
their throat open, to complete freedom. So that was a not a good segue.
So so between the ages of 15 to 17, so
Hmm.
you're already like in this pattern of control
Yes.
and fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the word I would use to describe every day at boarding school because it
Jeez.
was just fear based to the point where we had to do group therapy every night. And we all had to drink a certain amount of water. Well, one of the girls got yelled at and said that she was avoiding her feelings for going to the bathroom. So every night I'm in agony having to go to the bathroom, but I was so afraid to go to the bathroom to be called out, even though I wasn't even doing anything. And it was like that every day. And that's just one example.
Did your parents know what was going on there?
I couldn't talk to them. And then if I sent letters home, like, you know, I did when I first got there, I sent letters saying, like, I will be good. Just bring me home. This is awful, you know, blah, blah, blah. But then the parents were responsible for telling the therapist about it. And then you got into trouble for trying to get out of there. So then I just had to lie about everything and be like, everything's great. We did X, Y, and Z this weekend. It's all good. I'm healing so much. I mean, basically, it was 2 years of a lie.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
creates some, I mean, that creates some really damaging energy too. And
Oh,
so you go in,
absolutely.
oh my God. And so you go into college carrying all of that with you, right?
Yep.
So you go into college, you're 17, 18, probably 18.
18.
Okay.
Hmm.
And you went to college, that was Oklahoma State University.
So I actually started at Montana State University.
Okay.
Yeah, I stayed in the state of Montana and
That's right. Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Went went to college.
Mm-hmm.
That first semester was a disaster. I mean, because we also had to be on a food plan and talk about messing with your head too. So I mean, we had to measure everything out. And so then I went to my college dorm, which was just a free for all. So,
Right.
I mean, everything about the college experience was just a complete 180 from where I had been. So I hadn't talked to a boy in 2 years, and I met my now ex-husband. And when we met, I'm like, oh my God, I want to get married and have babies. And that's what we did.
Right.
And so I actually had my son in Montana when I was 19. It was a week before my 20th birthday. We got married and then had our son there. And then we decided that Montana was too cold and decided to go to Oklahoma. His dad was from Oklahoma, and my dad graduated from Oklahoma State.
Right.
So we decided to transfer schools, and that's when we transferred to Oklahoma State.
So, what was your state of mind like during that time? I mean, did you feel some relief, or were you still guarded and fearful and anticipating the next bad thing?
In hindsight, 100% I was, but I don't think I was aware of it
Right,
because I didn't.
subconsciously.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I also had a really traumatic birth with my son. I mean, I think my nervous system has been shot since I was probably 14 years old, if
Mm-hmm.
not even before. So I don't think consciously I was aware of it, but I always had high anxiety, just always on edge. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So you transferred to Oklahoma State University. You're still with your husband at that point.
At that point, I was, and we got there, and I'd say that first year, things kind of started to unravel, and we both decided like we were way too young to get married, and so we're gonna get a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So we got divorced in May of 99.
And then you stayed at the university.
Hmm.
And when was it that you met Marcellus Rivers, Alvin Porter, J.B. Flowers, and Evan Howe, which are football players at the university? So how long was it before you met them?
So I got divorced in May of 99. So November of 99, I had a good friend who was dating a football player. So it wasn't weird that we would go to a football house or a football party.
Mm-hmm.
It was November 20th of 99. We had gone out because they won against Baylor, I believe. And so everybody was out partying.
Sure.
And that was the first time that I met them. Was out at one of the bars before we had gone to a house party.
Then you cross paths with them at this house party, right? At this other
Mhm.
party.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then that's the night that you were gang raped.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So will you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. Um, so yeah, so we go to this house party after the we decided to leave the bar. And I remember being on the porch and talking to them. And I remember going to the door. I was being led to the door, and I had a really uncomfortable feeling. And then it's like I blacked out. And the next thing I know is, and I hope that I can be graphic here,
No,
or I
whatever
cannot
you
be
want to say.
graphic.
Yeah, whatever you
Okay.
want to say.
Okay. So, the next thing I know, somebody was forcing my head down
Mm-hmm.
on them, and somebody was behind me, and I was trying to get up. And I was screaming for my friend to come in, and she was trying to get in the door at one point. I don't know which point that was, but I was screaming for her. And then the next thing I know, I finally got up, and then I ran out the door, and she was standing right there. And I said, "Get my keys and get my shoes, like we're going." And I started bawling. She comes out to my car, and she's like, "What?" All the football players are like, "What's going on?" Whatever. And somebody saying, "Oh, she's just drunk, take her home." And my friend said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, I had another friend on the football team. I said, "Take me to his house." So she took me to his house. I told him what happened, and he said, "Get her to the hospital right away." So she took me to the hospital. So within probably an hour of this happening, I was at the hospital. The hospital called the police, and then I had to wait in a room until the police showed up, and then I had to sign a paper saying what happened. Now,
And you named these guys?
so here's the thing is that when I was at the hospital, I only knew of two. I didn't even know there were four.
Oh,
I didn't know there were four until the next day when I went to the police station.
wow.
Yeah.
So you named two of them,
Yep.
and then you went to the police station the next day, and then what?
Well, so let me back up a little bit because I want to make this very clear.
Yeah.
to anybody who doesn't have a rape advocate, which I believe California might still be the only state that has a law that if you are raped, you're assigned an advocate.
Okay.
And so when I went to the or the hospital, we found out that the rape advocate for the Stillwater um, hospital was married to one of the police officers and was told not to come.
Oh my God.
So I didn't have a rape advocate. So I was in there doing the rape kit, and there was a police officer who just walked in and was trying to talk to me as I'm on the table. And I want to be very clear to people that you do not have to do anything that the cops tell you to do if it feels uncomfortable, wrong. I mean, and it is your right to have an advocate with you. I did not know that.
Wow.
So,
I didn't know that either. Do you
yeah.
mind just so that people know and are informed what to expect if a person is raped and they go to the hospital? What can they expect? What does that look like?
I mean, I'm not an expert per se, but this is from my own experience and
Right.
kind of seeing what other people have experienced as well, is that everything is up to you. Nobody should ever make you do anything that you don't want to do. And also, if you go to the hospital and you go to the police and you make a report, you don't have to do anything else with it. So don't feel like, oh, if I report this, then I'm going to have this long, lengthy process or whatever. You might, but like, you don't have to. But I think that reporting it is of utmost importance, even if you don't do anything afterwards.
Right.
So when you go to the hospital, what you will do is tell them that you were assaulted, and they all hospitals should be set up with a rape kit nurse or like a trauma nurse who will be able to walk you through the kit and do all the things that they need to do to collect evidence, basically.
So the next day you went to the police department. I read somewhere you hadn't slept. I mean, it's not like you were in your right mind when
No,
you went to the police
no.
department.
So they came up, so a different detective came up to the hospital and basically interrogated me at like, 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is now, and told me that I smelled like alcohol and that, this and that and whatever. And I don't think I left the hospital until probably 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And I got into my friend's car, and my friend's boyfriend was out talking to one of the cops, and he was the football player. And the cop said to him, "Man, I hope she doesn't prosecute because we've got the OU game this weekend."
Oh, well,
And
of course.
that was like the start of this heinous, whole case. But so I went home and they took me home, and I had a different friend there, and he stayed with me for a while, but he told me that because they had football practice that next morning, or they had to meet at the locker room to do something. And somebody asked one of the guys about it, and he said, "Ah, she's just mad because we ran a train on her."
Oh,
And so he told me that, and I'm like, okay. And yeah, I mean, when this happens to you, you're not in your right mind.
well,
You're
of course
not
not.
thinking logically or literally,
Yeah.
or but
Well, and if you would
I
have wanted it, why would you be mad about it?
right. Yeah. Um, so I got a call from the detective that was assigned to my case, and he told me I had to go down to the police station that afternoon. And so I did. And yes, I hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, been up all night crying, in shock, don't know what's going on, don't know my rights because nobody told me what they were. And so he pulled me into the room and he told me that nobody corroborated my story, that if I went to court, I wouldn't win. And he asked me if I was crying rape because I didn't want people to think I was a slut.
Oh,
Yeah. So then he fed my head, well, you don't remember enough about the night to accurately accuse anybody. And I said, but I like, no, this happened. And he's like, but you don't remember. And that is a very common thing, that unfortunate common thing, that people will use that against you, that you don't remember,
right.
when in actuality people are drugged.
Mm.
um People, just, there's so many reasons why you wouldn't remember. Or maybe I dissociated,
Well, no, there,
maybe I was
yeah.
completely out of my body to where I didn't have to remember the horrible parts,
Mm-hmm. Right.
there's so many reasons, but that's so he made me sign well, he told me if I wasn't going to prosecute, that I had to sign this waiver of prosecution. And that has never been used before in that jurisdiction.
Wow.
So I went home, and the next day, after finally getting some sleep, I went back to the police station and I asked to talk to a woman police officer, and she wasn't any better than he was. And she said, "You already signed this. There's nothing you can do." My son was he wasn't quite 3 at the time. So I had him to think about too. And I also had reporters knocking on my door and calling me, even though my name wasn't leaked yet because it was not public record at that moment.
Mm-hmm. And it was because
How
they
bad.
were these star football players in that community, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So when this happened to you, did other stories start surfacing about those football players in that town?
Not publicly, but I'm going to say this is that it was within the first 3 weeks that happened. I got a phone call, and she said, now this was, of course, before cell phones, and I didn't have, oh my gosh, my brain is not thinking that, the little device that tells you who's calling.
Caller
Um,
ID.
Thank you.
Oh my God,
That's how
yeah.
old I am.
No, well,
Like,
same. I mean, I'm 47, and when we got the caller ID, I mean, we would all run down the hallway to see. It was so stupid. But yeah, I remember that. Yeah. It was funny.
silly. I think I saw the pager at that time too. But
Oh
anyway,
my God, the pager, yes.
yeah. So it was a woman, and she said, "I'm not going to tell you who I am, but I am going to tell you that they've done this to 4 to 5 other girls."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, like, thank you."
When someone tells you over and over again that you can't have what you want, you believe it. And those beliefs, unless they are interrupted, have the power to destroy your life. This book takes you on a journey of self-assessment, self-reflection, and self-empowerment, but it's not a quick fix. It's a playbook to a better life. And if you emulate my spiritual teachings, your life won't look the same 1 year from now. I want you to know that if you want something, you're meant to have it. That burning desire that you've always had is there for a reason. Your intuition tells you that you are supposed to do whatever you want to do, and that's why the burning desire never goes away. You may have shut it out a time or two in your lifetime, but it always comes back. Together, we're going to bring that burning desire to life. You can attract whatever you want, regardless of your past and present circumstances. When we're done with your spiritual transformation, those who have treated you badly will wish they hadn't. Miracles aren't reserved for the saints. We sinners are just as entitled to miracles, so let's go get yours.
Fast forward, I didn't tell my parents yet again because it destroyed them the first time, and this was my dad's alma mater.
Right.
And tried to go on about my life, and I finally got suicidal again. And my older brother said, "Either you tell him or I do," and that was in April 2000. So way after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this was
Hmm.
way before the Me Too movement,
Way.
so
Yeah.
not near as much awareness or respect surrounded something like this.
Absolutely. And in Stillwater, I always say this about Stillwater. It's like football is a religion and the players are the gods.
Sure.
And there was absolutely no way that I was going to have a case from the get-go. Um,
Well, and the
you know,
guys so these four guys, these four football players, they were actually interviewed, and they're like on their turf, but in their coach's office. Am I correct?
yes, all together in the coach's office.
And I'm assuming they deny,
And
of course.
they all say it was consensual.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
same thing, in
I
my
mean,
opinion.
no,
The
I totally
denial.
agree. And here's the thing that never before nor never after have I ever gone to a house party and said, yes, I want to have sex in somebody else's bedroom. Like, I mean, I mean, it
Right.
just like
Because that's every girl's dream. I
it's
mean,
every girl's dream.
it's every girl's
Well,
dream. I mean, you want to go to a party
yeah,
and you want to be thrown into a situation with four men that you don't even really know, and you
yep,
want to be you want to be gang raped by those four
right.
men, or you even want to have sex with those four men. It's freaking ridiculous. It's
It's
absolutely ridiculous.
it is absolutely asinine. And in my rape kit, um, there was evidence of hairs and fluids and whatever. But the thing that gets me is that there was anal tearing. You're telling me that I wanted anal tearing? Like,
Right,
are you kidding me?
right.
I mean, it just,
And then
well,
so the rape kit, they destroyed it, right?
yes, they destroyed it after 3 days. And they're supposed to keep those things for at least 7 years, I believe, if not longer.
Did you run into these guys after that?
So I started school in spring of 2000 pretending like nothing ever happened because I mean the police are telling me there's nothing here. What am I supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to class at the beginning of the semester, and it was a big lecture class, and the roster was being circled around. And I went to go sign my name, and I realized that one of them was 4 seats down. And I got up and I left, and I never went back to class.
Well, I became physically ill when I read about you going home, because this happened in November 1999,
Yep.
and you went home for Thanksgiving break,
Hmm.
and your parents were watching the football game, the
Hmm.
OSU football game, because that's your
Yeah.
dad's alma mater, right?
Yep.
And they
Yep.
didn't know what had happened,
Nope. In
and
fact,
you're sitting there,
yeah.
and someone said these players have been they had to set out one game or something. Somebody
Yep.
made mention of that.
Yep. That was their quote unquote punishment is that the coach said that there was a violation of team policy because the policy was that they had a curfew. They were supposed to be in by midnight, and so that was their punishment for being out past curfew.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, I wonder if
Yeah.
anybody asked them what the fuck they were doing out after curfew.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
That absolutely infuriates me.
Hmm.
And so you're sitting there with your parents
Yeah.
and you don't say anything that night.
Yeah.
You just said, they raped a girl. I think that's what you said, right?
So, well, no, my dad did.
Oh,
And there was an article about it. And so my dad said he knew that I had like another friend that was on the team. And he said, well, be careful hanging out with those football players because they raped a girl. And it was everything I could do to not say it was me. I just knew that I was going to lose it
oh
if I
my
did.
God.
When I did tell them, so I did call, told them what happened, and they were on a flight, the next flight down. My dad went into the president's office and his secretary said, do you have an appointment? He's like, doesn't matter. I'm here. I'm talking to him. And the president said, I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Jennings. It was all over the media. My dad was said, okay, well, can you at least tell me where your rape crisis center is on campus? And he turned to his secretary and said, do we have one of those? The answer was no, by the way. I ended up having to go talk to the dean of students because I was failing my classes because I wasn't going. And I had to tell the dean of students what happened. And then he said, well, you have to go talk to all your professors and then they can decide whether they will withdraw you or not. So I had to go around to 4 different professors and tell them what happened.
So, I mean, these people are enabling and encouraging and accepting this horrible behavior from these guys because they're athletes.
Yep.
And do you think these people knew the truth, or do you think they were in a little bit of denial? Or do you think maybe they just didn't care? I mean, well, clearly they didn't care, but do you think they
Yeah.
knew?
Oh, I think they knew, and I don't know if any of the other girls had gone to the police or not. In fact, I mean, if anybody knows anybody in this podcast, I would still love to talk to them,
Mm-hmm.
and find out other people's experience with this. Um, I think they knew. It's just that, I mean, the detective on my case had a full ride baseball scholarship to OSU. His cousin was a media relations director. Like, it was so incestuous in that way. As well as, it's just like the athletes can do no wrong,
Mm-hmm.
no wrong whatsoever. And the treatment of him is just, it's unbelievable. I mean, it is unbelievable, the stories that I've heard about the treatment of athletes, including, I knew a football player who, I mean, he never did a single piece of his homework. He had girls wanting to do it for him, and that's how he graduated,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, it just it just never ends. It just never ends with them.
No, and when I started digging into this, which is something I really hadn't done before, it's the culture in
Yes.
athletics.
Yep.
It's really sick. And I found one scholarly journal, one scholarly article after another that showed a connection between athletes in the more aggressive sports, which it was football, ice hockey, and I think basketball. Those three sports most prevalent for rape.
Yeah.
And then I get to dig in a little deeper, and it's almost like, well, it's not almost like, it is, they are really promised like this sex, drugs, and rock and
Yep.
roll lifestyle to
Hmm.
sign on and play,
Hmm.
and women are like part of this package,
Yeah.
and that's really, really, really messed up.
Absolutely. And it's all about power and money.
Right, it's all about power and money. And
Yeah.
looking back on it, the these men, these four football players, do you think that they are psychopaths or sociopaths, or do you think they have personality disorders? Something's wrong for someone to do
Yeah.
that. It's not their first rodeo either. It's not the first time they've done that shit.
No.
There's no
No.
way.
No, not at all. I think I have a totally different perspective back then that I do now.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of look at it from a bigger perspective where I say, how do we get to a place in society that that is okay? Where raping somebody or getting away with it because you're an athlete, why is that okay? Like, there's a bigger issue. And I do think that there is a culture in the sports where it's like, that's a, like you said, it's like a trophy, or like it's some sort of rite of passage that you do this and then you're accepted into this elite group. And it's sick. It's really sick.
It is really sick. And two of the players, one of them went on to sign with the New York Giants, and then another one went on to sign with the Bengals. Am I right?
I believe the Ravens. That's Baltimore, right? I don't really follow football for obvious reasons.
I really despise football, to be quite honest, and even more so now.
So,
Um, I think
yeah.
I'd read the Bengals, but maybe it was the Ravens. I mean, I can't keep them all
Yeah,
straight.
so fast forward after we after my parents knew about it, it was that next summer, and I was reading a Glamour magazine, and in this Glamour magazine was an article written about a woman named Kathy Redmond, and she had started an organization to help victims of athletes specifically. She had been raped by a Nebraska football player. Her dad went to Nebraska. I mean, the similarities were crazy. So I called my dad and I said, Dad, you've got to read this article. Well, he was on a business trip in New Orleans, and he went down to the hotel lobby and bought a Glamour magazine. And he's like, I bought a Field and Stream just to kind of even it out.
Yeah.
But he was the one that ended up calling her. And so she started getting involved with us. And she was the one that actually found attorneys for me that would do it on contingency, because the DA had said that he wasn't going to prosecute because he said there was lack of evidence. Well, of course there was. He destroyed it. So we had to find an attorney who would take this case on contingency. And at the time, I don't know if it's still the same, but Oklahoma only had a 1 year statute of limitations for criminal proceedings and
Hmm.
two for civil. So by the time we found attorneys, we had to sue civilly. Plus, like, they kept throwing the waiver in my face that I couldn't, sue criminally. So we sued the school, the four players, and the police department, who now we had a lot of evidence against the police department in terms of them, yeah, destroying my rape kit, losing the videotape of me and the detective. When the detective told me that nobody corroborated my story, yeah, we found out that they had only interviewed the four players in the coach's office altogether. So of course they're not going to corroborate my story. So many things that we found out were just with this private investigator were pretty incredible.
It's funny how people come into our lives, like Kathy Redmond,
Yeah, yeah.
and you have described her as your angel because
Hmm.
she not only helped you, but I mean her story was very similar. And I never
Yeah.
heard of Kathy until you and I crossed paths. And so
Hmm.
when I started researching all of this, and I read about that freaking Peter,
Yeah. Yeah. Christian Peter.
yeah, Christian
Hmm.
Peter. Yeah, like there is a really, really special place for him in hell, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And what I read about that was it made me physically sick, and that's when
No.
I had to stop researching it. And but it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, this Peter guy that I'm talking about, he was a football player, right?
Hmm.
Yes,
Yep.
and he raped Kathy Redmond. And
Hmm.
Kathy Redmond is the lady that started the organization We Lead Athletes, right?
We lead, I think it's a We Lead project is what
We
it, yeah.
Lead
Yeah.
Project. Okay, just
Hmm.
make sure I'm getting
Yeah.
my story straight.
Yeah, and it used to be, in case there's any other information about there, the National Coalition Against Violent Athletes in Cava was the original organization.
That
And then
Kathy started.
that Kathy
Okay,
started. It's the same organization. It just was reframed or rebranded a little bit.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I read somewhere that Peter went on to get married and have a child. And that's why I asked you a bit ago what you thought about those guys and maybe some psychological disorders going on, because it
Absolutely.
takes a you're not a normal healthy person if you do something like that. And
No,
I don't
no,
think, do you think these men rehabilitate?
I don't know. I mean, and what was the one that committed murder? I'm sure there's probably multiple, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. But anyway, no, there is something in their brain, and Kathy is much more versed in this world than I am. She's done a lot of research into this, where, but yes, like football in particular, because it's an aggressive sport. You automatically are more riled up
Mm-hmm.
than say like golf or something, or something. So you have that, and then you're praised for being a beast. So like
Right.
the thought process behind becoming this animal um is praised upon. And so yeah,
And your
I
whole
don't know.
life is about competition,
Yeah.
and the more
Yeah.
aggressive you are, then the better you
The
are on
better.
the field, and
Yep.
you're controlling.
Yep.
You're controlling everything. It's like a power play.
Right.
Everything's a power play. And
Absolutely.
so women are the same thing.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, then you do have traumatic brain injuries and things of that nature too. But I just think culturally it starts there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Let's switch over to talk about something more uplifting.
Okay.
We've got through the tough part.
Yeah.
I just really wanted everybody to hear what a serious situation this was, and that
Mhm.
justice wasn't served.
Well, I want to end on one thing about that
Mm-hmm.
because I think if you know something and you speak up, it can change somebody's life. But I will tell you what, it was about 2 years after, 2 or 3 years after it happened. I was at a house party again. But a woman came up to me and she said, I know who you are. And I said, Oh, you do? And she was like, I just want to let you know that I'm friends with one of them and they planned it. They planned it. They planned the whole thing. And I just cannot be more grateful for her for speaking up about that because that was the validation that I just, not that I needed it, like I'm validating myself and I know what happened, but to have somebody else say, I believe you, was like, I mean, it just completely changed my world. So I just want to thank her, and also just never be afraid to say what you need to say to somebody. And I think that was my justification, or my justice, um, about that.
Well, when you get accused of lying and you're not lying,
Right.
and you do everything in your power to plead your case,
Yep.
and nobody believes you, it's the
Yep.
worst feeling in the world. It's a really bad, disempowering feeling. And
Absolutely.
it plays mind games.
Yeah.
And I haven't experienced this on the level that you have, but I have experienced it. I grew up in a family that I was accused of lying about everything, and that just was it's just ridiculously messed up. And I won't get into that, but I know what it feels like to be accused of doing something that you haven't done, and you're just so desperately trying to get people to believe you. And
Yes.
then somebody comes in and says, I know you're telling the truth. I know
Yeah.
this and I know that. And it's a really great feeling, and it is validation. And so
Hmm.
I understand how you feel
Yeah.
1,000%. And thank
Yeah.
God for that woman.
Absolutely. The one that called me anonymously, and then that woman,
Mm-hmm.
I will be forever grateful for.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, you
yeah.
absolutely will not be the only person.
No.
There's no way. And so when this podcast airs, I'm going to make sure that everybody has our contact information. And so if they've got
Absolutely.
something to tell, oh, we're
Yep.
here for it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so
So back to the positive.
back to let's get to the healing piece of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you let's talk hypnotherapy.
Okay.
So in 2022 you visited Santa Fe, New Mexico, and that's where you found this hypnotherapist, am I right?
So, let me back up a little bit before that. So when I turned, it was basically a couple of weeks after I turned 40, I started getting really, really, really sick. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And I would go to doctors and they'd say, oh, it's allergies, or oh, it's I don't know, some random, something or other. I'm like, no, there's something more to this, because I I was always an athlete, and then I became a personal trainer at one point in my life, and really super into working out. But when I was working out, it would actually launch me into this depression where it was like a freak out. I mean, it was the opposite of endorphins, and I knew something was really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go to the store and have to take a 4-hour nap. Like, the fatigue was unlike anything I've ever experienced. That actually has been going on for the past 7 years. I mean, I'm better now, thanks to hypnotherapy. But how I found it was my mom knew that I was suffering from this chronic fatigue. Through research, I actually diagnosed myself, which was I had chronic active Epstein-Barr virus, that was chronically active because of PTSD. It was like my body is always in a state of fight or flight. So it's always active, causing me to be really fatigued. And for those that don't know, EBV is what causes mono, and it hosts herpes, and it hosts like a bunch of other different viruses. And up to 95% of humans have it. It can lay dormant in a lot of people though, but for me, it was like
Well, the trauma
the
probably brought it out.
what's that?
The
Oh
trauma.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then yeah, so anyway, so I was sick of being sick, and my mom had reconnected with the guy that she went to high school with, and he is an internist and psychiatrist who became a hypnotherapist and actually worked at the VA for 30 years. So he's retired, but he said, if you can get to Santa Fe, I will work with you. And so yes, so in 2022, I went down to Santa Fe and spent 8 days with him.
Tell me what that looked like, the hypnotherapy. I'm
So
really, really curious.
yeah, so his philosophy is that we all have one false foundational belief,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is to you. And so if you can just get to that false foundational belief, then you can heal that, and then everything else will kind of line itself up. We did 8 days of some hypnotherapy, and mine stemmed from my birth, where I was an emergency C-section, and they went to go cut my mom open, and the anesthesia hadn't taken. So my mom felt everything. So my subconscious picked up, I cause people pain, and therefore I deserve to have people cause me pain.
That actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, a lot of studies show that, I mean, infants just soak it up. I mean, everything that they hear and see. I mean, babies, I mean, it goes into their subconscious.
Yeah, right. Just
And
because we don't consciously remember
mm-hmm,
being birthed
mm-hmm,
doesn't mean that our energy isn't picking it up.
exactly. And when
Hmm.
you were younger, did your mom tell that story a lot? Did you overhear her
No.
telling the story? Okay.
No, she really didn't. So it was just kind of a regression that we did to figure out where it started because I've also, on top of gang rapes, like I've been in 3 car accidents. I had the traumatic birth of my son. Like, where did all this start? But really for me, it was birth. And quite honestly, it could be pre-birth because just of my dad's trauma from Vietnam and things of that kind of come through our
Mm-hmm.
being
Oh
and
yeah.
our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we inherit all of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah. I mean, I inherited so much from my family, more than brown eyes and high cheekbones,
Right.
you know? And I didn't
Right.
know about any of that. I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up in, rural Kentucky. And nobody ever talked to us about things like that. Like, nobody ever told me that I inherited emotions from my ancestors and negativity and trauma from my ancestors. Nobody ever told me that.
No.
Period. I mean, it wasn't talked about. And I have people to this day that think that I'm ridiculous for talking about things like this when it explains why things are the way they are.
100%.
And
I mean,
yeah, I just wish someone would have told me when I was younger why things happen the way they do and why we behave the way we do, because our subconscious beliefs control 90 something percent of our behaviors. I talk about that all the time. And so what that hypnotherapist told you is brilliant. Explains it. I mean,
yeah,
it's that bam, there's your answer.
yeah.
Yeah, because we
So
are what
it
we think we are.
right. But and I don't think, I come from a family where, I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the woo-woo Aquarius,
Oh,
whatever. But
same.
I'm like,
I'm a
but there's,
Capricorn, but I'm still woo woo. I'm
yeah.
called a devil worshiper too. I love that one.
Oh, my dad asked me one time if I was in a cult, and I said, if you mean cultivating peace and love on the planet, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
But there's science behind it, and I feel
exactly.
like I feel like I mean, all of this has been a process for me and has led me up to this. We didn't know that before, and I think that's part of the reason why we haven't talked about it in my family anyway. It's just that you only know what you know, and then
Right.
it's like then and then hindsight's 2020. We're like, oh, okay, well that makes sense for that. So I just had this epiphany, and I woke up one morning and I just wrote out a note to myself, and I said that all these rapes happened because I was showing myself how powerful I am. And by the way, I read your book this weekend, and it is fantastic. And I'm
Oh,
going to read it a million times. And I
thank
need to
you.
go back and fill out the exercises. But in it, you talk about you're always manifesting,
Hmm.
and that was kind of what I had this epiphany about, is that I was creating out of self-hate because I felt unworthy of good things, right? Because of my birth. But if I can create these giant things that are against myself, imagine what I can do when I love myself. And it just flipped
Yeah,
my life.
exactly. That's why I was asking those questions about how you felt during all of those different stages in your life.
Mhm.
Because just based on what you've told me, I know for a fact that by the time you were 15, and this was before your brain was even fully developed,
Mhm.
you had a very fearful mindset.
Yep.
And that fearful mindset was like a fearful mindset on crack when you got into
Yeah.
the boarding school.
Yeah.
And then
Oh,
after
yeah.
that, it kept spiraling and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's like,
That is exactly how I see my life, is like this cone of just, Yep, fear, 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 and part of it, and I know that I could talk about this all day, but part of it was religious fear too.
Oh God, yes.
And yeah, so also just that in part before I turned 14, like there was a lot of that as well. And so yeah, it was like the universe saying, okay, well, you didn't get it this time, so now we're going to circle back and now it's going to be even bigger. And then, okay, but now it's like I've been a top where the top was spinning out of control, and then I got sick and it kind of started slowing down so that now I can pick the top up and spin it the other way.
That's right. And you are 1000% correct. If you can attract all of that stuff in, imagine what you could do, or what you can do, what you will do, what you already have done, with just a simple shift from
Yeah.
going from that fear to a place of love. I mean, it's by no means, I would just want to make sure I articulate this the right way, because what happened to you, absolutely 1000% victim. There's no doubt about that. Period.
Yeah.
But there's also a reason that you were there in that environment with those predators. There was a reason, and it's energy.
Hmm.
It's energy.
Hmm.
And people like that, people like those men, they are in a really low energy themselves. You know, they're
Right.
just not, I mean, they're in a very dark, bad energy.
Right.
And so you get thrown in with these people, and it's just all fear. It's this fearful energy that you bring to you around these people.
Hmm.
When I lived in fear and my life really, really sucked, the people around me were predators in a whole different way.
Right.
And then when I cleaned up my energy and did a lot of inner work and got rid of those, debilitating subconscious beliefs, like what you worked with your hypnotherapist, the people
Hmm.
around me changed.
Yeah.
That's not a coincidence.
Right. Right.
There's not going to be some narcissistic lunatic that
Yeah.
even finds me in this day and time, because we're not a match.
Right.
And right. And some people, when I say that, will take it very personal and get deeply offended, when everything I'm saying is I'm just pointing out why things are the way they are.
Hmm.
Why are some people raped and some people aren't? Why are some people sick and some people aren't?
Hmm.
Why do some people live in poverty their entire lives when abundance just flows to other people, when we're all really on equal playing ground here? And so
Yeah.
it all has to do with that energy. What your hypnotherapist said about the false foundational belief, I had never heard about that before. So you taught me something new. And I want to dig into that a little bit more. But if you really think about it, man, I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Mhm.
Because everything that happened to you until you were able to realize what was going on and interrupted it was pain. I
Absolutely.
mean, damn.
I know. I have vowed to myself that I am done with all the crises in my life. And so
Yes.
the next half of my life is going to be amazing. And I am just claiming that now.
Yes.
And and I do want to say something to those who are listening, that something that I found, because I've been on a spiritual journey. When I turned 27, I went on this journey of, I don't believe what I was taught in religion, but what do I believe? And it's been a 20-year unfolding. Um, but I found in kind of the new age philosophy that there's a saying that, nothing ever happens to you, it's always for you. And I'm under the philosophy is it's both.
I agree.
And because I think that it was for me, but it still happened to you. And I think we victims, like, do blame ourselves enough that we don't need another person saying like, oh, that didn't happen. So I
No.
just want to make that very, very clear that it's
Yeah.
both. And in fact, the way that I see doing the hypnotherapy and stuff is that it that's been my life, is this transition and transformation of 2 4. So like I'm transmuting this energy of going, if I have a different perspective, then it's going to take me from that victimhood to like, wow, I am really powerful.
Right. Yeah, this is an absolutely incredible story. And the fact that you went through everything that you did, and you're still able to talk about it so eloquently, and you look great,
Oh, thank you.
and you've got this awareness, and that awareness is worth its weight in platinum
Yeah.
because you've got an awareness of what happened to you and for you. And
Hmm.
that awareness alone will take you far. Self awareness is a rare quality. It's rare.
Yeah.
And sometimes I had to learn it. I mean, I had no awareness at all. It was something that I had to learn. Nobody in the world should have to go through what you went through, period. And the fact that you are channeling that for good is incredible. It's incredible.
Thank you. I
And I
appreciate
really, really hope that these, these the future and the present makes up for everything that happened in the past.
that.
And you may have a bigger purpose than you even know
Yeah.
because of what happened. I mean, everything that happened.
It wasn't in vain. And I think that I'm now getting to the threshold of crossing into whatever territory that is. And I'm really excited because now that I trust myself to create out of things that I love,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh my God, like I am so excited to see what happens in my life. Um, this is a very pivotal, 45 will always be my pivotal year of doing the hypnotherapy and just completely life changing.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Do you know anything about, just full disclosure here, I'm not real sure what I'm talking about. So,
Okay,
do you know anything about astrology?
a little bit.
Do you know about this retrograde with Pluto? Like Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008, and now Pluto is finally like making its way out of Capricorn, supposed to be completely out by November the 19th. Have you heard about
Right.
that?
Yeah, and I don't know too much. Now I do know enough to know that 2008, like a different pattern was set up in my life. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
about yours.
Definitely.
Okay. So I can speak from personal. I don't know about everybody else's because I love it, but I don't know a lot about it. Like I love reading about it.
Me too. Well, and I've just really started digging into it, and anything that starts connecting dots for me, I will continue to dig into it.
Yep.
And so this has made a lot of sense to me. And I know there's something to it, and I wish I was more educated about this, but I'm going to try to explain it to the best of my ability here. And
Okay.
so in 2008, Pluto moves into Capricorn, and Pluto comes in to dismantle old structures and just things that just aren't working anymore.
Okay.
Okay? And so it's
Yeah.
like a time of really upheaval and like deaths and rebirths. And
Yeah.
so supposedly, whatever was going on with all of us, mainly Capricorns, Aries, Libras, and Cancers. You
Hmm.
said you were an Aquarius, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I wanted to bring this up.
Yeah.
Okay, so those four signs are most impacted by Pluto being in Capricorn right now,
Okay.
and back to 2008. So whatever happened back in 2008 is coming to an end. It's like all these endings. They're happening like right now. And then these four signs are going to like be rewarded for everything that they've been through because
Hmm.
for the past 16 years there've been a lot of really unwanted change, but ultimately led to something good. But a lot of curveballs, a lot of hard times, just a lot of turmoil, really. All these deaths and rebirths, it's like coming to this close in November, And then in November, then it moves on into Aquarius with this like new energy. It's like these old structures are dismantled. There's like a final ending. It's like the final show, and it puts an end to some type of drama that's been going on. And that could be on a very large level or a very small level, but in one way or another, it impacts us in a very personal way.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you said that you were in Aquarius, I made a mental note. I got to get back to this retrograde thing because
Yeah.
I've been talking about it, and so I really want to know what happens with you, on into these next few months as we're moving into like this new energy and this new alignment and whatnot. Because I know you've got plans. I mean, you've talked to me about your music, and you've talked to me
Yeah.
about things that you want to do and moves you want to make, and so I just wanted to draw some attention to that.
Okay, so for me, 2008 was the last time I was living in LA and I moved out of my apartment, and that is the last time I have had my own apartment in my own name. I have been living in somebody else's place, or if I had my own apartment, I rented furniture, or I have lived with, friends and family, or like in a furnished temporary place. So for me, it's about I'm going home. I'm going to have my own things. I'm going to have my own stuff. Part of the moving around, I do think, was fight or flight still,
Sure.
and being chronically stressed. And the other part is that, now I've lived in like 15 states and 23 cities. So I'm at home nowhere and everywhere at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to pick a place to stay is something that I'm going to have to work on with my nervous system
Right.
to to say like this is okay. Now, granted, I am an Aquarius and I am an air sign and I want to be everywhere. So I will always be a traveler. I will always like I want to build an empire and have houses everywhere. That's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of that's my jam.
Right.
But I need a grounding space and I need to be grounded somewhere. So I think this fall is going to be basically going home, and that in body and mind and spirit, and physically, finding a home, and also rooting myself back into music, which is something I've been doing since I was 3 years old.
Right. Right.
And so that's how I look at it. For me, is just like this. And even in hypnotherapy, he told me, he's like, you're going to find your home when you find your home. And so for me, that's a very tangible thing that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm like, I'm finding my own. I've been told my entire life who to be, by outside sources until I was 18. And then with all the trauma, then I told myself who I had to be. And now it's like this unfolding of like, no, actually, here I am.
Right.
Yeah,
So you're ready to let some stuff go.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Are you doing any advocate work right now for rape victims? I know you told me you took a break, but you might be easing back into it.
I did. So Um, I'm still with RAINN and I'm still with
Right.
Kathy's organization. But it's kind of hit and miss. It's not like I do something on a regular basis. Although, I mean, I'm available to talk to anybody at any time, and I just
Okay.
want to put that out there because I this is something that I'm obviously very passionate about, and I think that we are all here for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we open up and talk about things, the more we're going to actually heal as a nation, and then as a planet. You know, it's funny because as much as I love speaking about it, I'm actually coming to this juncture where I'm looking at it from a standpoint of, am I still putting myself into the energy of a victim by being attached to organizations? I don't know that I will always talk about this for the rest of my life, but I want to be known as Alison Jennings, the songwriter, or the whatever. Um, this will always be a part of my life, but it's really important for me to go out and do other things, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think that it really just boils down to how you feel when you talk about it.
Yeah.
Do you feel disempowered or do you feel empowered?
I, I do feel empowered. I just am coming to the point where, though, if I look at the theme of what's happened in my life, and it is about powerless to power, it doesn't have to be linear or literal.
Right.
Like I can go off and be a powerful entrepreneur or a powerful whatever, which is just as validating as doing speaking.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to do both in answer to your question.
Hmm.
But I think it's important for me to also have a life outside of this.
Well, you don't want it to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is you just don't want it to always define you.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Right.
Because I think we're bigger than that.
Oh,
I think we
God,
are bigger,
yes.
bigger than our circumstances and bigger than the things that have happened to us. And so it's really important for me to go live that life outside of it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And it certainly seems like that you are there. I mean, it seems like that you're there, and it's a pivotal time. And I
Yeah.
mean, when I mean, as you tell your story, I mean, what I get from you is you seem very empowered. You do not seem disempowered at all to me as you talk about it. You seem very strong and very powerful. I mean, I just want you to know that.
Well,
And
I
so,
appreciate
yeah, yeah.
it. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I have worked at it. I really
Oh, yeah,
have.
I
I
have no
have
doubt.
worked every single day on retraining my mind, reframing things. After the second time I was raped, I was suicidal again, and I came through that. So I've, it's been uh, a challenging life, but that's the reward is when you do the work, then you get this amazing reward at the end of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
just feel like I said, I just feel like I'm on the threshold of this entirely new life,
Mm-hmm.
this entire new chapter.
I feel like you are too. And that gives people who have been in your shoes and who are in your shoes a whole lot of hope. And
Yeah.
so, do you have any closing messages for our women, our girls out there? Because us chicks need to stick together. I'm not downplaying the struggles that men go through and have gone through, but damn it, women have absolutely been through the ringer.
I would say that if you have been through it, are going through it, know somebody who is, it is a process, but there are resources out there like Rain, like myself, like you, like people who can guide you into the next phase or um, into whatever it is that you need. And I do want to say too that just because it's taken me this long, if somebody's out there like, oh God, well, I'm still not at peace with my story or whatever, just you can be though, and just let yourself know that it might be a process, but that it's okay. There's a saying that to heal it, you have to feel it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really, really true.
Yes, it
And
is.
so there's no shame in feeling what you feel.
Right.
And yeah,
And I
that was
strongly, encourage people too. And you were, talking about how sick you got and, the chronic fatigue and, repressed emotions. That's what happens. If we, feelings are meant to be felt. And so if we push those down, we deny them, we don't fully feel into them and face them, that's what happens. I mean, they turn into inflammation in the body, and if that inflammation isn't released, then it will absolutely manifest into a physical illness. It
Mhm.
happened to me. I developed, I talk about this a lot. I developed, and it's in my book, interstitial cystitis from years of enduring abuse and toxic environments and shoving my emotions down and I'm asymptomatic now, but that's one example of a physical illness that I manifested from repressed emotions.
Right.
And I also want to say, too, anybody that's afraid to face those emotions, a fully felt feeling can only last for 90 seconds. And
Mhm.
with my coaching clients, I'll say, listen, get out a stopwatch and sit down and go back to whatever it is, that's bothering you or something that keeps resurfacing, and just feel into that feeling and set that stopwatch for 90 seconds. And when that 90 seconds is up, then just let it go. Let it go, as best you can. And if a person can do that, every day or 2 or 3 times a week, every time they feel into that feeling, then they chip away at it. And the more you chip away
Yeah,
at it, then the less power it has over you.
absolutely. Absolutely. And
It's just,
also, on that note, I know you mentioned in your book about people, people who haven't been through trauma tend to offer unsolicited advice
mm-hmm.
and say things like, I think you used the calm down
Oh, yeah.
or get over it.
Oh, just get
And
over it.
just get over it. And
Mm-hmm.
do you know how many times I heard with chronic fatigue, well, just take a nap. Or, or with my rape case, well, that was 20 years ago. Just, yeah, just move on. And it's like, listen to you know what you need for you. And if you need to feel it, then I love your process. I think that's a brilliant way to feel the feelings,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yes. Again, wish that someone would have told me all of this
Me too.
when I was younger. I mean, I've like stumbled across it as I've gotten older,
Yeah.
and so this has been wonderful, Allison. I mean, I appreciate you talking to me so much.
Oh, same.
Seriously, yeah. And I'm going to put all of your information with the podcast, and so
Okay.
that way people can easily find you. And
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And so thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
I really,
thank
really
you for
appreciate it.
having me.
Yes.
Yeah.
When someone tells you over and over again that you can't have what you want, you believe it. And those beliefs, unless they are interrupted, have the power to destroy your life. This book takes you on a journey of self-assessment, self-reflection, and self-empowerment, but it's not a quick fix. It's a playbook to a better life. And if you emulate my spiritual teachings, your life won't look the same 1 year from now. I want you to know that if you want something, you're meant to have it. That burning desire that you've always had is there for a reason. Your intuition tells you that you are supposed to do whatever you want to do, and that's why the burning desire never goes away. You may have shut it out a time or two in your lifetime, but it always comes back. Together, we're going to bring that burning desire to life. You can attract whatever you want, regardless of your past and present circumstances. When we're done with your spiritual transformation, those who have treated you badly will wish they hadn't. Miracles aren't reserved for the saints. We sinners are just as entitled to miracles, so let's go get yours. I want to keep in touch. I got a feeling, and I want to know what happens, and I want to know about your music and all of
Yeah.
the stuff that you do. And if you
And did you say you're moving to Nashville?
Well, so here's the thing about my life is that I'll make a decision and then the universe will say, that's funny. No, here you go. You're going to end up in Iowa or something. And I'm like, okay.
yeah,
Um, but I am at the point, yes, I do want to move to Nashville. I trying to phrase it so it's not a want or a need. But definitely things need to happen in that to get me to Nashville. So yes.
yeah,
I want to get more into the songwriting. I did performing when I was in LA, but I prefer the writing part, and that's definitely where the writers are.
yeah.
Long story, yes, I'm trying to get to Nashville. I actually just graduated college in May because when I was going through the case, I dropped out of school.
I would have
And
too.
yeah, I mean, it probably took close to 3 or 4 years for all cases to be finalized. It's always bothered me. So after I did the hypnotherapy, I ended up living with a friend, and she had gone back to school to get her master's after being an engineer for 20 something years in counseling. And so she's like, why don't you just go back? And I'm like, you know what? I'm absolutely going to. So I just graduated in May. I actually would like to go on and get an MBA. So I am looking at Vanderbilt too, just to kind of stick to the Nashville
Oh,
thing.
well, I
Yeah.
mean, you can't beat Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean,
So
their MBA program is one of the best in the nation.
yeah.
Yeah, so you
And
can't beat
I
that. Yeah,
No, no, you can't be that.
right.
So I'm working with the admissions counselors and kind of see it wouldn't be till obviously next fall or the fall after, but I would like to be in Nashville for those reasons.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm in Kentucky, and we are, I think, about 2.5 hours from Nashville. And so, when I'm just going to say, when you get there,
Yes,
let me
that's
know.
right.
And
And we have a recording studio in our basement.
we do.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we do.
Excellent.
Yeah. And so, but I would, love to actually meet you in person if you ever
Mhm.
are close by. And if your intention is to get to Nashville, then you're going to get there. And I know that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You're right. I just got to clear out that little cobwebs of doubt or disappointment or
Right.
fear, you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
By
Which,
the way,
But
one thing that you said. So I am. I've also gone through some sexual abuse and things in my life, but yeah, that when you were talking about that really hit home for me. And then you were talking about driving around that curve, and what if you just went straight? I've
Mhm.
been through times like that in my life. I mean, that's a lot of what you said really hit home for me today, and
Mhm.
I loved this episode. I mean, loved
yeah.
this talk. It's awesome. So thank you so much for being open and so willing to share your story. Hopefully, we can help other people who have been through similar experiences.
I agree, and thank you for sharing that with me, and also for the feedback. And I mean, that's brings tears brings tears to my eyes. Um,
About time. I've been over here crying the whole time.
Yeah.
well, I did a speech in Charleston
Well, why
in
don't you come
20.
over here so she can see you?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's weird when he's just like back there talking and nobody can see him.
I mean, I do feel like it's. Did you ever see the movie? Was it Oh God with what is his name? I'll have to look
I
it
don't
up.
know if I've
Anyway,
seen that. It's, yeah.
I don't know if these are turned up. Let's see.
Well, you're not.
I'm not on screen yet, but I will be. No, I got to turn these headphones up so I can hear.
I can't. These headphones drive me nuts. I wish I didn't have to wear them, but he says I have to wear them. It's all about
You
the
don't
sound,
have to.
the sound
If you don't
quality.
want to hear the guest, you don't have to wear them. Hello.
hello.
Nice to
Well,
meet you.
nice to meet you as well, and thank you for your service
Yeah.
for you know helping your wife do her podcast.
Of course. I
Uh,
love it.
yeah, that's so awesome. So in 2015, I did a speech in Charleston, and I had a guy reach out to me later that night, and he said that he was molested by a Catholic priest for 9 years, and that nobody believed him, and that he felt validated when I was telling my story. And I just said, "This is it. This is why we talk about it,
Yeah.
because if anybody can feel validated or believed or loved or seen or heard, then
Mm-hmm.
then we're doing the right thing."
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
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 And there's power in storytelling, too,
Yeah.
because people
Yes.
relate to that.
Yeah, and I think that that's where I want to go with my memoir and with
Yeah.
my music is tell it like I'm probably a better writer that way than and that's how I want to tell my stories.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. I think that's where we are. I mean, I hope that we are kind of on I am an Aquarius, and so it's like all the Aquarian age, and whatever, but it's like that's part of my mission is to open up dialogue. And so thank you so much for having me
Oh,
today.
yes. Yeah.
To,
So,
And we'll
about that.
Uh, the school you went to, the boarding
Mm-hmm.
school, was that associated at all with the school that they did the Netflix documentary about? Did you see that?
So yeah, I did.
Because the story sounds so similar.
And I think one of our counselors had come from that group.
oh my God.
Like we weren't part of that school, but one of our counselors had come from that group. And the thing about the schools, which by the way no longer exists because there were way too many lawsuits against it,
Mm-hmm.
but there was only we had one counselor out of probably 12 who had a master's in counseling, and the rest were like just people like it had no business counseling teenage girls
Jeez.
whatsoever. And it was, I mean, I didn't commit suicide, so I guess in some way you could say that it saved my life, but in other ways, it was probably more detrimental than some of the other traumatic things that happened to me in my life because it was brainwashing for 2 straight years.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then in your very formative years
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
You
Before
know?
your brain's fully developed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, part of it is that I struggled with is my counselor, we were talking one time in group and we were talking about he said something to the effect of like, oh, Allison, like sex feels good. And I said, no, it doesn't, because at that point I'd basically been raped and then like had horrible experiences afterwards. And I said, no, it doesn't. He goes, you are full of shit. And I was like, no, I'm like, I'm telling you the truth. And so it's always been really hard for me to tell my truth
Mm-hmm.
without fear of some sort of somebody telling me that I'm not telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that played out again, in the second rape and whatever. So that like as an as now, 47 years old, I can kind of look back and see where these patterns started. But a lot of it, like I'm having a lot of friends who went to that school who are just now dealing with the trauma of it because
Jeez.
they've been, putting it sweeping it under the rug, or, oh, it wasn't that bad. But then you realize how brainwashed you were and went, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, like
Right.
yeah,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And when you're
So
that
yeah, I
young,
watched with that.
God, when you're that young,
Well, and we had
Mm-hmm.
girls there who were 13 years old.
oh God.
And one of them hadn't even touched a boy before, and they labeled her as a sex addict, and she had to go to meetings. And it was just, I mean, it was just,
Let me guess, it was all men running
yeah,
this place? Yeah.
no,
It was
it was
women.
men, it was it was men, and then two of their wives. And one wife was a nurse, but she's the one that made us do all these like food plans and whatever. And then the other one was very passive. You could tell that he was a narcissist. He was the one that was my therapist.
Oh my
And
God. So it was men.
yeah,
Oh my God. I missed that somehow.
yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah, yeah. So grown men without credentials telling young girls
Yes.
that they're liars, or making it like I had to go to AA meetings. I'm not an alcoholic, like, and I knew that, but I had to go because otherwise they're going to throw me in this lockdown facility. So like, yeah, it just,
Jeez.
I tried not to tell my parents about this for a while because I didn't want them to feel bad,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that they think it's less than it really was. And I mean, it just, I don't know. There was a whole
That's crazy.
other chapter of trauma.
Mm.
Well, I was getting ready to say when you just said a whole other chapter of trauma. I mean, you've certainly got the makings for a great memoir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I want it to be more of the spiritual aspect of what transpired in my life,
Mm-hmm.
coming from religious trauma, which is another thing. I went to we were going to a Baptist church at the time when I was 14, and I went on this retreat, and it was like a sex retreat where we had to write down everything we'd ever done sexually, and then we were told that if we so much as touched ourselves, we would burn in hell. So like I went from that to then the whole rape thing at 15. I mean, just like,
Yeah.
so for me to have traveled this journey, I think that's the most important thing I want to say. The journalist that I talked to on Thursday, who's doing more of a journalistic book on the violence against women in sports.
Yeah.
I'm going to let him tell the kind of the concrete evidence of my story, whereas mine's going to be more emotional. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did any of, and I'm not talking about just the active participants in any of your assaults, but any of the police officers, the prosecutors, anybody, like, has anybody been held accountable for anything?
No. As far as I know, we kind of kept tabs on. So the detective on my case, now granted, in hindsight, the universe is really punny. And so Detective Buzzard was his name.
Oh, jeez.
Nice.
I'm like, I don't think you could have scripted that better. A bird of
Right.
prey. Yes.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, yeah. And Stillwater is in Payne County. I'm like, yeah,
Oh my
that's
God.
that's a pretty good one too.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
Wow.
he resigned and went on to the FBI. So I don't know where he went. I know. I mean, it was mind blowing to me too. So when we filed the lawsuits, the coach resigned, the president resigned, and my therapist resigned.
Okay.
So if they're not hiding anything, it's like, okay. I mean, so I think the only accountability that might be held is probably karmic. I mean,
Right.
I
Right.
doubt that anybody involved is actually having a really great life at the moment, but
Oh, I almost brought that up during our interview, and then we started talking about something else. But yeah, the energy that all of those people created, oh, it's going to catch up.
yeah,
It will.
yeah,
It will, and
yeah.
it'll be in a way that they least expect,
I completely agree.
and it may or may not have already happened.
Now with Oklahoma State, it's a little bit different story. So with the case against them, we settled out of court not for money, but they had a policy that if any members of the athletic teams got into trouble with the law, the coach was not required to tell the administration about it. So they had to reverse that policy. I don't know if they ever did. I doubt it. But they're the ones that I help. Well, them in the police department, I hold more responsibility to.
Yeah.
So after I did this hypnotherapy, I actually ended up at the end of 2022 back in Oklahoma. And I never in a million years saw that coming, but higher self, universe, whatever, had a higher plan. And I thought I was going to be triggered. I thought I was going to be a wreck because it was football season coming up. And I went into Oklahoma and I'm like, huh. All right.
It's
Like,
a place. It's
I'm
just a place.
It's just absolutely. And also, thank you. So I have a new mantra. It's F you, thank you, I love you.
There you go. There you go.
Which is F you, the human emotions of it, and then thank you. There's got to be a lesson. And then when you find the lesson, you're like, I love you. And so I felt that so much that I actually reached out to the president of OSU because it's a woman,
Okay.
first woman in history. So I wrote to her and I told her what happened. And I said, listen, I want to come in and help you build the biggest rape crisis center or whatever you need on campus. And first, the email was never responded to. So then I responded and I said, I just need to know how to proceed with the media in OSU. And within 10 minutes, I got an email back. And she said, she's like, I'm sorry that happened to you, but like, we've got this crisis center now. We've got this going on or whatever. And basically said, no, thank you. And so I'm like, you know what? Okay, I'm done. Like, I'm done trying with OSU. It's whatever.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I don't see that changing much because football will always be Stillwater.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Those people probably aren't going to change anytime soon.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, in Oklahoma, and I guess Kentucky too, because there's no professional teams, right? So
Correct.
it's like
Right.
it's all about college.
Yes.
Oh my God, the Kentucky Wildcats, are you kidding?
Yeah.
I mean, they could burn down a preschool with the kids
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah.
And people would be like, God, I hope this doesn't interfere because we're going to the tournament. I mean, we're going to be in the NCAA. I can't stand it. Like you have no idea. I can't stand it. There could be, somebody's mother could die, And if the Wildcats were playing, they'd be like, well, what time's the funeral going to be? Because, there's a
Yes.
game at 2. I can't stand it.
Who gets married on game day?
I can't stand
come
it.
on.
I swear to God, I cannot stand it. I can't stand it.
Yep.
It drives me nuts.
It drives me nuts too. And I was never a football fan, but now I'm really not a football fan because all that goes through my head is like, who's doing what on this team and what is going behind the scenes. And, we still, Kathy and I have friends in our group who they're still getting $1 million gag orders and stuff so that nobody knows about. I mean, it's still happening, and it's just, it absolutely makes me sick. So I'm so with you. Maybe we can just travel in Europe during football season or something.
God, wouldn't that be great? Well, we will. We're going to be airing
play games
this
over there now.
We're going to be
though.
airing this.
Oh,
during,
darn it! Okay.
Well, we're going to be airing this during football season, so they can suck it. Yeah. And he's a big, football fan too. I
go to games.
But most men are. Most men are. Most people are. All my friends are. I'm totally the odd one out. I can't stand it. It drives me nuts.
No, I get that. And I have 2 brothers and my dad, so I grew up, they all are big football fans, and to each of their own. It's not like I get upset that they love football.
Sure.
That's fine, whatever, if that's what floats your boat. Just also be realistic about what's happening behind the scenes.
Be aware. Yeah. Don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
Or act like it's not going on, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And to put them on a pedestal. That's my thing. It actually has very little to do with the sport itself. It's more so that these people are being put on pedestals just because they make money for the team or they're a great, whatever they are. And it's mind blowing to me.
It is. It's just like you said during the interview. It's power and money. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you, we will. We're going to get this aired definitely during football season, and
so November will be 25 years, and I think that might be a good time to put this out there for my. Yeah.
So 25 years. Okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna make a note of that. Okay.
99. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
A quarter of a century I've been dealing with this. Like, ugh.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, maybe.
Well, when you get to Nashville, and
I get to Nashville,
that's right.
yes.
When you get
There
to
you go.
Nashville and you want to record a demo and don't want to pay for studio time, you just let us know. We've got a sound booth. We've got everything you need.
That I appreciate that so much. Yeah, I got to get back to writing. I am just kind of working with a new doctor, trying to get my body back up to full energy and do some healing on my neck and some other things that are going on. But when I do, I'm going to be a writing fool. Like, just
awesome.
New songs, new everything.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll stay in touch, and we'll send you all the stuff about this podcast. I can't wait to see what happens with you. Yeah.
It's going to be good, and I think it's going to happen really fast. I really do. I think just a totally different trajectory, and thank you so much for being the launch pad for that. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Allison.
you so
Thank you.
much. And by the way, I just loved your book. Like it was so good. I felt like I could just relate to so many things in it. So
I'm so glad. I'm so glad, because I didn't want to write like a typical self-help book, because they're just kind of all the same, really, and there's just not like a real relatable tone. And even with Wayne Dyer, Wayne Dyer absolutely changed my whole life, and I love that man. But some of the things that he would say were so over my head that I'd be like, what is he talking about? And I'd have to read a paragraph 5 times to comprehend it. And so I wanted to write a book for someone like me who can just, bam, jump in it and start doing the work and understand it, like no learning curve. And then add some humor in there to lighten the load, because shit, you get in on those exercises and it gets deep. It takes you there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for saying that. And if you have time, if you will leave an Amazon review, I would appreciate that so much. I'm having a hard time getting people to leave reviews, but I get it. I don't always do it myself, It's hard to remember that.
Oh, yeah. No, I will hands down absolutely go do that.
Thank you so
Yeah, of
much.
course.
Yeah,
Of course.
and let me know what you think about the 30-day manifestation challenge too.
Well,
as you go
when I
about
call
it.
you from Nashville, you're going to be like, "Oh, it worked."
Yes. Yeah. All right.
right.
Well, Alison, we'll talk to you soon. Thank
Sounds
you so
great.
much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye. The Thought Snob Podcast with Paula Swope has been brought to you by Thought Snob Media in association with Special Purpose Studios. All production, mixing, and sound engineering by me, Will Swope. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please take a few seconds to give us 5 stars and leave a review. See you on the next Thought Snob Podcast with Paula Swope.